generative AI is a pretty cool space right
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think, certainly, over the course of the past couple of years, it's become part of the common lexicon. And I think we started to see, on a individual and personal level, the transformative impact that these sort of technologies can have. The Chat GPT raised generative AI to the collective consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And it started to show people the enormous potential. Before the kind of generative AI revolution, most people thought of AI and ML technologies as largely efficiency plays. It was about speed and efficiency.
Right.
What generative AI has shown now is it aids the creative process. I can have ChatGPT be a thought partner.
While maintaining the speed and efficiency
Totally.
as well. Okay.
Or enhance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But the real value in our industry comes from novelty and creating the best assets. If I'm a month faster than someone and I'm inferior,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately clinicians shouldn't use my. If I'm a month faster and superior, I'm going to have a whole lot of use of that product.
Yeah.
And I think what we're finding with these sort of technologies, and why I think, part of, you go back to your horse analogy, generative AI is a really interesting horse in applying it to biology, because the early signals and some of the early clinical programs and some of the next waves of clinical programs are suggesting that we're getting better answers than historical approaches enable. And I think that's something that if you kind of just keep pulling that thread, if you've got a capability that can give you differentiated products consistently, that's a pretty exciting proposition to get behind.
Right now, I don't want to put, I had a conversation with a guy a bit earlier today, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, so I'm not going to name names. But he was getting to a point around, we were talking about the impact of artificial intelligence and its early impact on molecular discovery, yes. Right? And he kind of alluded to a point where he was kind of saying, like, to change the paradigm, you talked about it earlier, yes. The costs and access paradigm, there needs to be more than faster, better molecular discovery, because things get really tight and expensive, totally, and complex at the clinical level. So I guess big picture, if you look at the impact of artificial intelligence and the way that you're using it at Generate, how far along the continuum does it actually, do you envision it making an impact on better and faster, more?
So I would, I'll challenge that underlying premise, but let me kind of just start with the end-to-end view, right? Artificial intelligence, machine learning are tools.
Mm-hmm.
They're tools to apply to all parts of our lives. And they will be applied to all parts of our lives. And all pieces of the drug discovery and development continuum will ultimately be transformed by these underlying technologies. Today, we've found the sweet spot for our core company is in molecular design.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting to use it on target discovery approaches. And we're thinking about how we can use data-driven, digitally native approaches in trial execution and some of the biomarker discovery.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in the future, consistently, humans who embrace AI co-pilots are going to outproduce humans alone.
Yeah.
And that will be true across all parts of all industries.
That point brings up an interesting conversation that I've had many times with AI forward biotechs. And that's this concept of, especially those who maybe were born, pre-AI acceptance or understanding. I've had many conversations about the nuance of successful integration of traditional biology and computational biology at
Totally.
a physical level, at a personal level, at a, intellectual property level.
That's right.
So tell me how you manage that at Generate. Like is there a challenge there, or is it a situation where, from the company's outset, it was, we're looking for these very open-minded biologists who have some computational skill, or are you marrying two different disciplines in a, throw them in a room and make them sort it out kind of way?
Well, our two co-founders who still are very active at the company, Molly Gibson and Gabor Grigorian, both are computational scientists that have studied biology, right? So Gabor was a professor at Dartmouth, but in both computer science and biology departments.
Right.
Molly was a PhD in computational and systems biology from Washington University with a computer science undergraduate degree. These folks have, done a brilliant job of creating an organization and a ethos of an organization where our computational scientists are not in service of our experimentalists. Our experimentalists are not in service of our computational. We are collaborative across the domain, and we embrace people who have that multidisciplinary training. And the single biggest predictor of success within Generate is intellectual curiosity.
Yeah.
And people who are voracious learners, who are interested in the domains, because none of us are experts in every component of this complex, maze that we call drug discovery, development, manufacturing, commercialization. We all are dependent on certain handoffs, but I think the people that can stretch across multiple parts of this, these problems are really profound that we're trying to address. Biology is extraordinarily complex, and unfortunately, we've seen, while we've had, a lot of organizations with extraordinary depth in individual disciplines, we've only made so much progress.
Right.
Having people that can span these different domains, I think, are going to give us a different set of answers. It's not going to solve everything.
No, but it's certainly. So, I mean, I think about it in the context of 3-year-old, going on 4-year-old Generate had the company launched with the same mindset even 3 years earlier, much less 10 years earlier.
Right.
That talent deficit that you talked about earlier would have been even more exacerbated, right? Like in what you're doing. Are you seeing improvement in terms of, replicating Molly, and who else did you mention? Are you seeing are you seeing improvement in replicating those skill sets down the line, not just at the founder level, but down the line?
So
coming out of academia, I mean,
so there were about 100 people in the world when I started at Generate that were skilled at the intersection of machine learning and protein engineering. We knew all 100 by name.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a small niche community.
Right. Good place to be for those folks.
Right. But you know where they actually all worked? Tech. DeepMind, Microsoft Research, Facebook, Salesforce, all had protein teams.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And, obviously some were within academia as well, but, it wasn't a classical path of training. And, market dynamics are very powerful. Supply and demand dynamics are very powerful. Let's just say when tech enters into the bidding war for those types of talent, salaries and compensation change.
Right.
And so, there has been an influx of people, that are now entering these areas. To the point where we had our ML team had an internship program last year, and we had 5 spots. We had 2,000 applications.
Really?
Yes.
And these kids, I say kids because these young aspiring professionals that are interested in a position like that, are they coming? These 2,000 people coming to the opportunity with PhD,
machine learning, math, biology experience.
That's what I'm wondering. Is it if they're coming at it with that sort of scientific background and curiosity that you would require in an ideal world.
And listen, like some of our team, may just be brilliant mathematicians that are extraordinarily versatile.
Mm-hmm.
Others will be extraordinary biologists with a natural predisposition toward computation, right? Some are computer scientists, that are very versatile. And so I don't think there's one single phenotype, but we're really fortunate to have some extraordinary people on our team. Both our computational team and our experimental teams are filled with brilliant people, and even our experimentalists oftentimes have computation because this doesn't work. One of the things that has been super important from the inception of Generate was how do you view data? And unfortunately, in many organizations, data is power. It's my experiment. That I have the data.
I see what you're getting at.
And when you have a machine learning approach, data has to be a collective asset.
Mm-hmm.
And you need an orientation on the experimental side that recognizes that every data point is captured to refine the computational approach. And that is not your data, it's our data. Because the whole machine operates on that currency. And so there's a huge cultural piece that I think is really important for these companies that are starting at this intersection. And one of the debates I had for a long time with colleagues at Merck was, will it be the incumbents or the insurgents that actually crack this code? And the incumbents have huge advantages, right? Whether you're a tech incumbent or you're a pharmaceutical incumbent, if you're in tech, you have some of the best computational talent. Mm-hmm. You have extraordinary resources, right? If you're on the pharma side, you have some of the best biological talent in the world and extraordinary resources. What these insurgent organizations can do, though, is create a culture that actually blends the best of both worlds, because I think it's really, really important that, in pharma, oftentimes the computational scientists are in service of the biologists. And in tech, if you have biologists, they're oftentimes in service of the technologists.
Right.
In these sort of organizations, the ability to create alignment and kind of a parity that these two, it's a symbiotic relationship in many respects between the computational team and the experimental team, and that is something that I think has been really, really extraordinary to watch, to cultivate. And if you're an experimentalist and you don't subscribe to one of our 5 core values is around being digitally native. Mm-hmm. And around how data has to be a collective asset. And if you don't subscribe to that, Generate's just not the right place for you.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're a bad person.
When you say collective asset, I'm curious about your take on collective, meaning, within the 4 walls, so to speak, of Generate, versus data being a collective asset to the industry, and where the lines fall. And I'm sure it's probably both, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean,
but how do you, when you look at it from an industry-wide perspective, open source data, publicly available data, which is incredibly important, huge. How does that kind of shake out in terms of Generate's approach to differentiation and competition, frankly?
I mean, so when the company was started, the ratio of public to proprietary data obviously was 1 to 0, right? It's all public.
Yeah.
And, the reason Generative was actually founded to solve the protein challenge in some respects was because there were 2 extraordinary public data sets. One was the sequencing revolution has given us 180 million amino acid sequences across all species. And then number 2, the structural biology community gave us an extraordinary database called the Protein Data Bank, where 200,000 high quality, high resolution structures of proteins were exceptionally well curated. And what that allowed you to start to do is establish the interrelationship between protein sequence and protein structure. And if you think about technologies like AlphaFold from DeepMind, those in some ways were trained on these two data sets. So the ability to go from a sequence to a structure is a prediction challenge, right? And if I start to understand those two data sets, I can start to make predictions around different sequences and different, structural or folding patterns. Generate was always oriented toward adding a third leg to the stool. As a therapeutics company, sequence and structure are interesting. Function is where the business is, right? We care about how, proteins interact, how they drive biological function.
Right.
And unfortunately, there is no public database of function. And there's a number of inherent limitations in the industry to create a kind of an open source functional database. Primary among them is inherent variability of measurements. So if you were to run an assay and I were to run an assay in different labs, we may get different values. And as we all know, with machine learning based technologies, the quality of data is paramount. Garbage in, garbage out. So part of what we've tried to do within the company is create proprietary data sets of extraordinarily well curated data. We use a lot of automation. We use miniaturization techniques, microfluidics, to do experiments at greater volumes so that we can, when we run experiments, we want to collect as much data as possible. And that's allowed the company over the course of the last 5 years to go from a starting point of 100 examples to an individual experiment to the biggest experiment we've now run is 1 million defined variants. And every one of those data points, either biophysical measurement or functional measurement, are captured and fed back to refine the computational approach. And so, we've now generated, sequenced, and built into full-length proteins and tested around 5 million proteins. And all of that data now is informing our models. And that's helping us now to understand, what does it mean to be go from a protein to a drug? Key parameters, affinity. How tightly do I bind to the target? Potency, right? Immunogenicity. All of the manufacturability and developability parameters that are really important. Those are things that are measured to actually help inform our modeling to say, how do I optimize to go from protein to optimal therapeutic in as quick a time fraction as possible. And so the data sets are accumulating, and there are major data gaps that we still see that we're making either sizable investments ourselves or we're looking to partner, right? And, on the internal investment, we've made an investment in cryo-EM microscopes. So these are we have 4 cutting edge, world-class, high resolution cryo-EM microscopes. The reason we bought those were in that protein data bank of the 200,000 high quality, high resolution structures that I mentioned, only about 2,000 are protein-protein interactions. Most of them are freestanding proteins. And in medicine, or in the pursuit of medicines, you want the interaction. You want to understand what residues are driving function in that antibody-antigen interaction. And we've decided that let's figure out how to supplement that data set because that data is really valuable for our models. On the other side, there's a whole array of data that we're still very data poor as a company and as an industry. Part of why we did the partnership we have with MD Anderson, MD Anderson Cancer Center, one of the world's busiest cancer center and sees as many patients as any center in the United States, was we wanted to have understandings of the drivers of certain cancer types. We understood that at a foundational level. Our technology would allow us to drug those targets, and it's been a great partnership because it brings the data from a world-renowned organization with our unique capability to create medicines for patients and hopefully get better medicines to patients faster.
I've been trying to learn about spatial biology,
Yeah.
right? Like this is
Yeah.
a new trend, but
Right.
Buzzy, is that spatial biology? Like, are you guys, is that part of the play here? If
Well,
not, we'll just move
no,
on.
not a huge part, but I mean, listen, we combine all components of these sort of technologies. The reality with us, for us, is um, when we step back and we think about the opportunity that sits before us, there are these data sets that you rightly point out that are missing. Um, Ultimately, what we're trying to do is be able to master sequence to function in a relationship.
Hmm.
Because if I know the sequence to function in a relationship, what that allows me to do is program. I can sit there and type in the code
Mhm.
to drive the desired function. And that's what you, if you think about like this, the real long-term massive transformation, it's taking drug discovery from the artisanal craft it is today and making biology engineered,
Yeah.
making it program.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're on a path toward that.
We've spent a lot of time talking
Yeah.
about AI, and that's good. You've given great concrete examples of the work Generate's doing. I'm curious about your take on the investor appetite for it, because there's no doubt a hype curve, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a hype curve going on
Totally.
right now. And for the past 3 years, we've been talking about investor discernment.
Yeah.
I've got all these reasons to be discerning. Why? Like to your point, why?
Right.
I don't want to invest in you.
Yes.
Why should I? Right?
Yeah, totally.
AI is one of those things that I feel like there are so many companies that are riding that hype curve right now. That's an area where investors should be discerning.
Yeah.
Like if you come at a conference like this and you say, wow, machine learning and AI, let's pull back the covers and have a closer look, right?
Yeah.
So give me some, I guess, color around how, like if you're speaking to the investment community, which you are,
Yeah.
you get a lot of VCs listening to this podcast, how they should be discerning hype from reality around artificial intelligence forward biotechs right now.
I mean, I always start with the people, right? I mean, I carefully scrutinize the team of the organization that we would potentially work with, partner with.
Mm-hmm. The people, not the app. Like don't look at we've got an app or we're outsourcing to a
look at the individuals that are actually driving that technology, and are these folks among the world class contingent in those domains. I look at the publications that they've done either while they're within their organizations or in prior lives.
Mm-hmm.
To understand the quality of their science. We recently published one of our models. It's a model called Chroma, and it was in Nature, right? So when people ask me, like, how do I know the quality of your machine learning? You can see the Nature publication,
right?
Have a read at it, right? And you'll see, we're really blessed with an extraordinary team of machine learning scientists. I think then, you obviously have to look at the technology as well, because, it's great to have great people, but if they're not translating that into a technology that's really meaningful, then, the technology though, or the concept, I think, we can all use the same words. The question then becomes the translatability. And, what I ultimately want to be judged by is the output.
Mm-hmm.
Are we creating better drugs than we could have otherwise?
Yeah.
And, there are going to be a series of interim markers until we hit the real marker. Do these drugs make a difference in patients' lives? And that is, the definition of success that I aspire to, that Generate aspires to, because of the nascency of some of these technologies. We're just early in that journey. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes the long lead times in pharmaceutical discovery and development obscure progress
Mhm.
or the view of progress, right? The revolution is happening right now.
Yeah.
The outcome of that revolution, given the regulatory paradigm that we have in front of us, is maybe a decade away.
That long lead time is so that long lead. You anticipate that lead time will remain in the interim.
I don't think we collapse clinical trials under the current FDA guidance in the very short term.
So we're getting to clinical trials quicker.
We're getting to clinical trials quicker. I mean, you're taking, a 10 to 15 year process, cutting off a couple of years. Ideally and theoretically, you should be getting to better answers, which changes probabilities. But again, we're going to have to wait time to judge that.
Right.
I think, will there be opportunities for further compression? Absolutely. Will we find ways of compressing the clinical trial dynamics? I believe so. I believe both there'll be better preclinical models and ways of enriching clinical trials to do that better. But, the nature of our business right now, is, that is the path that we have to take. And these technologies should be held to the same level of scrutiny as, a technology that was discovered through more traditional means.
Yeah. So I'll look in your crystal ball, right?
Yeah.
Questions everyone hates to answer. How long before you and I are sitting here having a conversation about the impact of these technologies on clinical trials? Because that is at the inflection point that we're at right now in terms of its impact on molecular discovery and design.
I think we're going to start to see impact over the next few years.
Yeah.
I think we'll look back in the very near future, and these technologies will be pervasive in everything we do.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we're just learning how to interact with the chat GPTs of the world.
Do you have any concerns?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, these are extraordinarily powerful tools. But we already have some pretty extraordinarily powerful tools. These just seem to be
we're trusted with, right?
That's right. And so, I mean, like all of these things have to be pursued with due caution and due consideration. But, the reality is I think the good outweighs the concerns in a pretty massive way. For us, it's interesting. One of the things that people say to me all the time is like, well, Mike, how do you deal with the hallucinations of generative AI? Well, in a construct where you have this tight integration of dry and wet lab, we experimentally validate everything. So the hallucinations actually are enormously powerful for our modeling.
Because it's iterative. It helps.
Yeah, because we learn.
Right.
We learn from failure in a way that the industry's never learned from failure. And if the model is ultimately hallucinating, that protein doesn't express and it doesn't work. And that data is already fed back.
Right.
And so it helps us get to a better answer faster.
Yeah.
And those sort of bugs are actually features in many respects in this sort of world where you're experimentally validating. I think if you're just thinking that computation is going to solve everything, I greatly discount organizations in biology that think computation will solve everything. Our workforce is skewed. Everyone considers us an AI ML drug discovery company. Our workforce is skewed toward experimentalists. We have about 2/3 of our workforce that are experimentalists.
Yeah.
And that's just because we have to validate. We have to measure. We have to generate the data. And the only way to do that is through experimentation, to do it reliably. And so, for us, certainly in the short, medium, and I'd say, medium to long term, the paucity of data, functional data, the data that we really care about across a number of domains in life sciences will lead us to a place where, we are constantly needing more and more information to refine these computational approaches to get to the best answers as fast as possible.